Hello, Becky here. Welcome back to my channel. I am here to do the quarterly wrap up. It's hard to believe that the first quarter of the year is already over, but I'm very excited for spring. I'm very much feeling the spring vibes and ready for winter to be over. So I do not do monthly wrap ups or TBRs. I just am not very interested in them, and I don't read a lot to feel like I need to do a monthly wrap up, but I realize it's good to do a monthly wrap up because I don't necessarily talk about every single book that I have read in a month in a vlog, and sometimes people just want one video they can go to and see all the books someone is reading and get recommendations and reviews and stuff without having to watch vlogs. So I decided I'm gonna do my wrap up along with quarterly stats, as I have read 30 books this first quarter, where some people will read that many books in 1 month, and it is more worth it for them to do a monthly wrap up. But for me, a quarter wrap up seems to be a good balance between not doing it at all and doing it every month. So I'm just going to share a few little stats. I am using Allie from Hardback Quarters spreadsheet that she does for book tracking on Etsy. I will share the link down below. It is totally worth it. I pretty much track all of my reading through Storygraph. I used to do Goodreads. Now I'm exclusively on Storygraph, and I love the stats that Storygraph shows. But I decided to use the spreadsheet as well because one of my goals this year was to keep track of the money I am spending on books. So they have a place for that in the reading tracker at the bottom. So a few of the stats I wanted to share very quickly before I'm going to do a tier ranking list of all the books I've read in the first quarter. And that's the way I've decided I want to show the books that I have read. Normally, I would just start with the first book I read of the year and go to the last book I've read this quarter, but I decided I'm going to organize it in a tier list. So the first stat that Storygraph shows is like what moods. My moods have been predominantly lighthearted at 13 books, funny at 12 books, and emotional at 9 books. Oh, and adventurous at 13 books because I read the Spy Family manga, the 10 that were released in English. So that would be adventurous. Books can be more than one mood. So lighthearted, adventurous, and funny could all be Spy Family. Reading all 10 of the Spy Family manga has really skewed my stats, I feel like, versus other years, but that's okay. That's what my reading is this year. Mostly fiction, but I'm hoping to bump up the nonfiction in the next 3 quarters of the year. And you can see my genres manga at the top. I don't know why manga is considered a genre. It is more of a format because you can have romantic manga, you can have murder mystery manga, you can have thriller, horror. Spy Family is a funny, adventurous manga, but it's not like romance. So I'm not sure why manga is considered a genre for some stats, but that's okay. I've been reading a lot. It says 4 digital books this year, so I don't use my e-reader very often. I have a hard time finding the books that I want, but in 2023, I got a library card for the big city, so I have access to more digital books now, and then audiobooks as well. Just a larger library for it. So I am hoping to use my e-reader more that way. I don't usually buy books on it. It's almost exclusively books that I have borrowed from the library. On Storygraph, I mark a book if I've read it over 50% audio, I mark it as audio. But on the reading tracker, if I go to books read, I can put that I read them audiobook, ebook, physical, or a mixture. So I like that I can do that stat on the spreadsheet. And I need to work on doing a few more ratings. So my average rating is 3.29, and I did more ratings on the reading tracker, which puts my average rating at 4.1. So I tend to rate high, I feel like. I've talked about this in the past. I don't normally rate books. It's just vibes for me. Either I'm very excited about it, loved it, it was like an obvious 5 stars, or it was like really bad. Now I DNF books, so I don't read a ton of bad books because I've DNF'd them, so I don't rate them. The other stat I'll share is that in January I read 7 books, in February I read 14, in March I read 10. So the big huge jump between like doubling from January to February is because I was doing the manga series, and that was 10 manga plus a light novel. But I would say 5 to 7, 8 books is probably average for me. So I'm not somebody who usually does stats, so let me know what you want to hear in a quarterly wrap up for stats plus just a regular general monthly wrap up type thing, since I'm combining the two. Let me know what kind of things you talk about yourself or what you're interested in when you click on someone's wrap up videos. What kind of information do you want? So I've read 30 books so far this year. and I'm currently reading 3 books. Out of those 30 books, I own 21 of them. So I'm so proud of myself because at the beginning of the year, my goal was to read more of the books that are physically on my shelf, and the first like 4 books I picked up this year were all borrowed from the library. So I was like, I'm doing great at reading off my shelves. Now it's a majority off my shelves. Again, the manga, I read 10 manga, and I had all 10 on my shelves at the beginning of this year, and then I bought the light novel and read it. So I've borrowed 9 books, and I've bought 16 books this year. And out of all the ones I've bought, I've read the one for the Spy Family. But hopefully I'll get to more of those soon. So let's just jump into the tier ranking. So I just created a very basic tier list here. I was talking to my husband about what names I can pick. Some people change the names at the top here, like God tier, or they name it after Starbucks drinks or something. I'm not clever enough for that, so I'm just gonna leave it. My husband said he likes like the S, A, B, C, D, and that's fine. It's basic, it's normal. It's classic. So I'm just gonna go based on the books that I have at the bottom, how they uploaded themselves into the tier ranking, and we're just gonna go from there. And I'll talk about why I read them and what I thought about them, if I liked them, you know, all that good fun stuff. This is Family Portrait. This is the short story for the Spy Family, and I read this last after the 10 volumes of Spy Family. So S is gonna be like the best of the best, 5 stars. They won't all be 5 stars. It might be like 4 to 5 stars kind of thing, just books I like. And then, you know, 4s in here, 3s and the 2s and the 1s kind of thing. We're gonna put the light novel at the bottom here. It gets a D grade. It was fine. Like, it's not a 1 star. I didn't hate the book. It didn't do anything offensive or anything. It was just fine and didn't really serve a purpose. You don't need to read it at all. It's probably like a 2. I think I marked as like a 2.5. I don't hate it, but it's not great. A Nurse's Story, this is called. This is a true story that I am reading for another vlog. I have this as a physical book, but I ended up picking up the audiobook for it as well to help me get through it. Again, not because it was bad or I was hating it or just wanted to get it done faster. It's just because I had so many books on the go and I'm trying to do all these vlogs and I just need to get through books. So this is A Nurse's Story, Wrongly Diagnosed by Carol Gino. This is a story of a nurse who goes to work at a home for the elderly, I believe. I don't think it's a hospital setting. I believe it's a home, and she meets this girl. She's like 19, 20 years old and learns that she was diagnosed with epilepsy, but in the beginning they basically thought she was psychotic and spent time in psych wards. This book was first published in 1985, so you have to remember the context of the time it was written and when this girl was going through what she was going through and put into these like psych wards and stuff. I don't know what it's like today versus back then, but it wasn't great for her, and it is a hard story. Trigger warnings for misdiagnosis, epilepsy representation. It's not told from her perspective, it's told from Carol Gino's perspective as the friend of the one who had epilepsy. Mistreatment at the hands of medical professionals. It is a nonfiction book. I thought the story was fine. Like, it wasn't too slow, too fast or anything. It was fine. It's hard to rate nonfiction, especially when it's like a memoir or a biography. It wasn't the most mind-blowing nonfiction biography, but it was good. Do I think it would be worth it for you to read if you do have epilepsy or know somebody? I think if you wanted to read it, it would be fine. I don't think it's necessary to read. I don't think it's important read. It is, you know, 30 years old. Oh gosh, it's 40 years old. It's too old. It is 40 years old, so like the medical stuff isn't going to be the same, and it is about her mistreatment and going into psych wards and stuff. So I wouldn't say it's an easy read for sure, and I don't think it would have any benefit on you today if you are suffering with seizures or another medical condition similar to that. I don't necessarily think it's a must read. Why did I pick up this book? I bought some of these books that were wrapped like in the brown paper, and then they just have like the first line of the book or a few words describing like the synopsis of the book kind of thing. They're like mystery books. You don't know what you're picking up. I think I have 4 or 5 of them, and I'm doing a vlog on reading those mystery books. That's why I picked up that one. Whatever they wrote on the brown paper sounded interesting. So I'm gonna give it an A for being informative, and it wasn't poorly written. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that one. And then I read Beloved by Toni Morrison. I read this and The Color Purple. In February, I read a lot of books because of Blackathon, hosted by Jesse on YouTube. I will link their channel down below. And I also wanted to read some Black romance. I didn't get to as many as I I wanted to. Like I said, I read 14 books in February, and that's when I put all the pressure on myself to read all the books and make all the vlogs. So I think I did a disservice to Toni Morrison and Beloved by reading it when I read it, and I ended up picking up the audiobook for this as well. And I was a little bit confused by this. Let's go on Storygraph here. Beloved is a fiction, classic, historical, literary, magical realism, dark, emotional, sad, slow-paced. I do think it was fairly slow-paced. It says it's the #1 in the Beloved trilogy. I've never heard anybody else talk about the trilogy. I don't plan on going forward with it at this time. It was first published the year I was born, so that is kind of cool. Books and Lala is doing this series where she's trying to find a 5-star from every year that she's been alive, and I was thinking about not doing that exactly, but reading a book from every year that I was alive. So I've read one for the year I was born. I should have on my tier ranking a did not rate, because I think it is unfair of me to rate Beloved because I wasn't in the right headspace when I was reading it and able to appreciate her writing. I think the writing was fine. There's definitely trigger warnings in this for death of a child, slavery. It is Black historical fiction. I can't think of any other specific trigger warnings, but for your own mental health, please look up trigger warnings. I talked about Beloved in my Blackathon vlog in February, so please check that out if you want to hear more of my thoughts about that one. I know it's a beloved book. A lot of people love this book, and I know Toni Morrison is a beloved author, Black classics author, and I think I have to spend more time reading her books and really getting absorbed in it. I think the way she writes might be a little bit harder for me to fully understand what is happening. I'm just at a place in my life right now where I need very basic storylines or I'm just completely lost. Yeah, I'm not gonna rate that one, but it wasn't bad. And then I read Britt Marie Was Here. This was for the March buzzword. The buzzword for March was main characters' names. I voted on that being one of the themes because I'd bought a book called Rebecca Not Becky, and then I didn't get to it in March. Yeah, I just decided to pick up Britt Marie Was Here. This is my very first Frederick Bachman. I read this one pretty slowly. It took me like 10 days to read. I like to read like a book a week kind of thing, but I was reading this one in between my other reads, between Spy Family and I did the Red Rising trilogy, and it wasn't that the plot was slow. I was just taking my time with it, and I think that's good for me. I need that. There's a couple books on here that I've taken a little bit more time, just the way it worked out with how I was reading other books, and I really liked it. It's kind of a boring book, to be honest. Like, not a lot happens. I don't know if that's common with Frederick Bachman. The only other one I have is Beartown, and I hear a lot about that one. I've never even heard of this Britt Marie Was Here. Britt Marie is separated from her husband. She is like 60 years old, and she's looking for work, and she's harassing the unemployment office lady that she's like assigned to, and she's like, I need a job, I need a job. And they find this job listing in this little town where like everything is shut down. There's one building still standing that is like the post office, it's a pizzeria, it's the car mechanics shop, you know, like it's everything, because everything else in town is just completely shut down. And there's a rec center there that was supposed to be shut down, and they weren't even supposed to list the job, but it was near Christmas and it was vacation time and everyone was going on vacation and they forgot to take the listing down. So Britt Marie ends up getting this job, and there's a bunch of kids there and they love to play soccer, and she doesn't understand it. She's like, my husband likes soccer, but I don't get it. And she's very prim and proper and likes things clean. She's very neat and always cleaning everything, and she just falls in love with the town, and the town falls in love with her, and she ends up, this is spoilers, so if you care about spoilers, skip this part. She ends up being the coach for the kids' soccer team, and they suck at soccer. Like, they're the worst. They can't hit anything they're trying to hit, and she knows nothing about soccer. She doesn't care about soccer. She doesn't like soccer, and it's just this really sweet story that I just really loved, and I loved that it was kind of boring and slice of life and barely anything is happening, but I just needed that for my brain, for myself, to just have that kind of palate cleanser between all these other books that I was reading. So this one is going up at the top, 5-star for me. And I was thinking about it, like, is it a 4, 4.5, 5? But I was doing the caw pile, and I was like, I love the characters, and I loved the pacing, and I loved the plot, and there's a little bit of a plot, but there's really not a lot of plot, and I don't know, I just, like I said, vibes, I guess. So I enjoy that. On the come up, I read for Blackathon. Again, check out my Blackathon vlog. This is Angie Thomas. This girl, Brie, is a hip-hop rap artist. Not my kind of music, not my genre at all, but I love reading books about passion and people who have passions, even if they're passions that I don't understand or that I don't have or whatever. I love reading about just people's passion in life. life. And on the come up, this is the same author as The Hate You Give and Concrete Rose, and On the Come Up takes place after the events of The Hate You Give and takes place in the same like neighborhood. You don't have to read The Hate You Give to read On the Come Up and vice versa. There is security at their school, at the high school, and they want to like check her bag, and she has been bringing in snacks like chocolate bars and gum and stuff that is like contraband. You're not supposed to have that in school, and she's been selling it at school, and they pin her to the ground. The security guards are quite rough with her, and she writes a rap about it and shares that rap, and it goes kind of viral. And there's the people out there that are like, yeah, cheering her on, that's awesome, that's great, preach it, Brie, we need to hear this. But some of her lyrics are a little bit questionable and can be taken and are taken as violent. In this book, you are getting all of Brie's thoughts. You're in her head. She's the main character. She's the single point of view that you're getting. So you know why she wrote these lyrics and what they mean to her. But there are a few people in her life, like her mother and her brother and one of her good friends, that are like, no, overall, I enjoyed this book. I have a hard time remembering books, honestly, but I got some really good conversations out of it. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the A because of the conversations and things that it made me think about. The first book I read this year was A Very Merry Bromance, which I wanted to read December 2022. Didn't get to it. I was like, I will read it December 2023. And then it came in at my library in the new year. And I was like, well, it's too late. It's not Christmas time anymore. I don't want to read a Christmas book after Christmas. But I did, because I was like, when am I ever going to get to it? I love the bromance series. It's been a few years since I read the other 3. This is the 4th one. It's been a few years, but I didn't feel like I needed to reread them or anything. I don't have the time for it. And they're connected enough that you know the characters from all the other books, but separate enough that it can be read on its own. And I just love them. This is the story of Colton, and he is a country star singer in Nashville. All the books take place in Nashville. And I can't remember her name. She is a lawyer, and her family is actually kind of famous. Very, very rich. They started like a whiskey distillery thing back, you know, over 100 years ago kind of thing. And it's their relationship, kind of enemies to lovers, a little bit more like reluctant, not allies. Her family wants to use his face for their next like campaign to sell whiskey, and he wants to date her, and she's like, no, I don't want to date you. But he's like, you go on a date with me, we'll talk about me doing the promotion. So it's like reluctant that way. She is just reluctant because of her own personal things. So I just love the bromance books. I don't think it's quite S tier, but it's a good time and I love it. The Neighbor Favor I read for Blackathon. This was my black romance. I read this in the midst of being in extreme amounts of pain after hurting my rib and not being able to move. This book was okay. I wanted so much more from it. I was a little bit upset about the characters' decisions. I didn't like that the main character, her name is Flower. Lily? Maybe? One of the sisters' names is Lily. I think it's her. I felt like she acted out of character a lot, and it wasn't even explained by like character growth. It was just when she was around him, she acted differently. She is in love with this fantasy book that only one book was ever written, and the author is MIA. Basically, he has no social media or internet presence whatsoever. No one knows what happened to him or why he's not writing books anymore. And she Googles him every once in a while to see if he has a website or anything. One day he does have a website. She emails him, he responds, they correspond for a bit, and then he ghosts her. I don't know, it was just okay. It's like between a B and a C. I wanted more out of it. Worthy, I listened to by Jada Pinkett Smith. She narrates her memoir herself. I really enjoyed it. Memoirs and stuff should be in like did not rate. I don't know like if it's top tier or not. I feel like it should be. I think it would be a really good book to have as a physical book because between chapters she has these like little pauses where she asks like a reflection question and you would reflect on it and then journal the answer. And I really like that idea. I don't have a physical copy of her book right now. I've listened to it. That's fine for me. I enjoyed it. I'm glad we listened to Will in 2022, me and my husband, or the beginning of 2023, and really enjoyed that audiobook. And I'm glad that I was able to listen to Jada's side of the story, basically, and just her life growing up and what she went through and how she became an actress and stuff, and her life with Will, and the ups, downs, challenges of marriage and Hollywood and fame. I read Out There Screaming, a black horror anthology edited by Jordan Peele. I have not watched anything by Jordan Peele before, but I am thinking I might because I don't like horror movies, but I've been learning more that horror is subjective and it doesn't just mean like slasher, bloody zombie jump scare stuff. Horror can mean a lot of different things to different people. I'm in an argument with our friend that loves the Get Out movie. And I'm like, well, it's horror. And he's like, no, it's not a horror movie. And I'm like, yes, it is a horror movie. He's like, no, it's not. It's more like a thriller. It's more this, it's more that. And I'm like, but Jordan Peele himself says it's a horror. And if he's the one who made it, I think he has every right to call it what he wants to call it. But I think it's just subjective. He's not thinking of it as horror because it's not like this bloody slasher jump scare kind of thing. I don't know if there's jump scares in it. There might be. But anyways, Out There Screaming, I read this for 2 reasons. The buzzword, I would not have read it for the buzzword if it wasn't the Literally Dead Book Club pick for February. And I read it in January because the buzzword in January was there and I had nothing else on my shelves already to read for it. So I picked up this one. It was a little bit ahead of the game for the book club live show. And I listened to the book club live show when it was live as we were driving back from Edmonton, and people didn't like it for the most part. Both Kayla and Aaron from Booked and Busy was Kayla's guest for that live show, and they didn't really like this book. And a lot of people said it wasn't a lot of horror. There was more sci-fi and like speculative. And there's no short story by Jordan Peele. He's just the editor of it. I don't read anthologies and short story collections very often because I just find myself wanting to like complete the story. I'm like, I just want to read it and get to the next story, and then read it and get to the next story. And I'm just constantly trying to get to the next story, and I'm like, no, I gotta stop and enjoy the stories. And this one, it was taking me a little bit of time to get through it physically. This is one I read as an ebook, and then I switched to the audiobook about halfway through. Each story had its own narrator, so I thought that was really cool. And there was quite a few that I actually really enjoyed. So I'm putting it in the B category because for being an anthology and a horror, there was enough of them that I actually really did enjoy. There's always going to be a few like flops that you don't really connect with, of course. I did write down my thoughts on each story so that I would remember for the live show, but then we happened to be traveling for the live show, so I didn't have my page with me. But I'm not going to talk about my favorites here. I've already been recording like an hour now, so I don't know who I would recommend this to just because everyone disliked it so much. But I think if you're not a huge horror reader, if you like speculative and you like sci-fi, you would probably like this with like elements of horror to it. And then I read Risk Factor here, and this is also for the mystery vlog, and this one is like a mystery thriller. It was published in 1999, so again, it definitely has that older feel to it. It also takes place in a psychiatric ward. This is a fiction book, and one of this psychiatric ward nurses is murdered, and we're following the perspective of another woman. She's a doctor. She wasn't there when the nurse was murdered. The book isn't super memorable. You learn a lot of information through a few conversations that she has like with her mentor, and for being written in 1999, I thought there was a lot of really good conversation about mental health and psychosis. Again, it might be outdated, but I thought for its time it was really interested and had some good conversations. I'm gonna leave it in the C category, I think, because it was good while I was reading it. Let's move on to the next book. I don't do tier ranking, and it's taking a long time and I'm tired. They Never Learn I picked up because sometimes I can't find a book for the buzzword and I click on Storygraph if there's anything that first sounds interesting, and second, if I already have it on my shelves and I just haven't seen it there. And I'm pretty sure somebody put in They Never Learn. And I was like, oh, I've heard good things about this. It's a thriller about a woman who murders men who deserve it. Academic female Dexter kind of thing. And I was like 2-3 chapters in and I realized they does not fill the prompt of their. Like it's not they are, it's they never learn. So I'm like, that doesn't work. I'm sure I could have like gotten away with it. No one's policing this buzzword. Like no one cares if I marked it as the buzzword. But for myself, I was like, no, that doesn't work. So I chose to finish reading it anyways because it was interesting to see, I don't remember her name, to see a female serial killer go after men who have wronged women, wronged others, and have gotten away with it, especially in the college setting. It was interesting. I figured out the one twist in the story a couple of chapters before it was revealed. The one twist didn't take me by complete surprise, but I didn't guess it too early either, so that was good. And there was another twist at the end that I did not see coming, and I don't know how I feel about the ending, like the epilogue part of it. It was an interesting direction to go in. I thought it was kind of cool. I don't know if I should put it in A or B. I think I'm going to leave it in the B slot because I don't remember a lot about it. It was good while I was reading it, and if I go back and look at my review of what I wrote down, I know I had a few things to say about it, but it just didn't have as much conversation as On the Come Up and even Risk Factor. So I said I was going to go through the books in the order that they popped up here at the bottom, but I'm going to go with the Red Rising because it's a trilogy, so I'll do those in order of the trilogy. I read the Red Rising trilogy between January and March for my husband's birthday in March, and it was kind of like a surprise birthday video for him. He didn't know I was reading it, and that was his favorite trilogy last year. Again, I have a vlog about it, so you can check that out if you want to hear my thoughts. I try to keep the vlog spoiler free. If you're very, very, very sensitive to spoilers, then you might not want to watch it, but it is for the main twists and turns and everything, the reveals, it is spoiler free. So while I was reading the first 2 Red Risings, I was not in the best place mentally with how much I was trying to read. So Red Rising should probably just go like in did not rate, but I put Red Rising at a 4 in my graph here. I was very confused by Red Rising. If you don't know what Red Rising is, where have you been? But to be fair, I've only read it for the first time this year as well. We've colonized Mars, or are trying to colonize Mars in this book. In the Hunger Games, there's districts, right? And there's the capital, which is the best, and then, you know, 1 to 12, and our main character, of course, Katniss, is from 12, the lowest of the low, the poorest district. And in Red Rising, there's colors. So gold is the top, that's like the capital, and then our main character that we follow, Darrow, he is a red, and that's like District 12, lowest of the low. And the reds are like miners, and they mine for helium. And that's how they're going to terraform and colonize Mars. And basically they want to rise up, Red Rising, and take out the top power of gold and make equality between all the colors. So I can't remember how many colors there are between red and gold, but there are different, and everyone has their place. Pierce Brown wrote Red Rising when he was like a teenager, and he wrote the whole thing in like 3 months or something crazy like that. And everyone talks about how the writing does get better. So Red Rising is a little bit slower in the beginning and then really fast paced at the end, middle to end, but it's a little bit slower at the start of the book, and it's kind of got a few starts to the story. Actually, you kind of like have this little chunk here and then another chunk and another chunk, and the action stuff is what started to confuse me, and keeping track of all the people. And Darrow ends up in this institution and is trying to like infiltrate the gold society, and just trying to keep track of all of the students in the institution was a little bit confusing, especially in a war situation where you have multiple sides fighting, not just like A versus B, but it's like A versus B versus C versus D versus E, and they're all fighting each other and they're all against you. It's confusing. Okay, my brain is not capable of keeping track of all the information. So I'm gonna put Red Rising, I think, at a B. I mentioned in my vlog that I would have DNF'd it if I wasn't doing it for the vlog, but I am glad that I went on with it. The second book is Golden Sun, and it's kind of like at the same for me as Red Rising, maybe even one lower, because I was even more confused in Golden Sun and had no idea what I was doing. And I won't really talk about what these are about because they are the sequels to Red Rising. But Morning Star, I'm going to put up higher because I actually really enjoyed that one. I had fun with that one. I was feeling better mentally and physically. I was feeling better. I was kind of out of the rut of life. It wasn't a reading rut so much as just a life slump and reading too many books, taking on too many books. So I read this one in March. It's like a almost 22-hour audiobook, I think, and I just wanted to keep getting back to it and finish it, and not just for the sake of finishing the vlog and being done with it, but I was actually interested in how it was going to end. So I'm gonna put that one up. It's funny enough because my husband's favorite book in the trilogy is the middle one, and that was my least favorite. That's all I really have to say about that one. Agatha Christie, Crooked House, I read for Gavin's Patreon Slagatha Sleuths, and I've read a few with the group, with the Patreon, and it's fun joining in as a group, but they're not my favorite. I liked And Then There Were None, and that was pretty much it by Agatha Christie. I'm just not a huge Agatha Christie person. They're very much classic murder mysteries, which is fine, and I do like cozy mysteries and murder mysteries and stuff, and I do read them occasionally. I like more of the mystery thriller. I like a little bit more action in it. We read this and then watched the movie, and I thought it was just fine. I don't know if I was confused. I remember basically nothing about it. So I'm just going to leave it in the D category. It wasn't a 1 or a 2. It probably sits closer to a 3-star, 2.5, 3. It was more just, I don't remember it, and it was just fine. I can't even tell you the plot of it. Somebody dies. The grandfather of this wealthy family dies, and they find out that he has been killed. Who in the family killed him. He's very wealthy and he's handing all his money down. You know, in a murder mystery like this, everyone has a reason to kill the victim. In this case, like, they all had a reason, but they also all didn't have a reason because he was freely giving his money. The grandfather wasn't like hoarding his money and they were trying to kill him for the life insurance. He was very generous and was like, you need help? You want to start a business? Here. Your business is failing and you need me to bail you out? Here. Like, he was very generous with his money in the book. There were reasons that they might not want him around, but also he was a beloved grandfather and a beloved father in the family. So that was kind of interesting that the victim wasn't absolutely hated. I'm just gonna leave it at a D. I'm gonna go to The Color Purple next, which is by Alice Walker, and I also read that for Blackathon. And this is a story told in letters, another Black historical story. I got the physical book from the library and then got an audiobook from Audible for it to help me just get through it again. I'm not going to rate it. I was in a not great headspace for it. I thought it was good. I didn't mind that it was all letters. I don't hate epistolary novels. I don't hate those. I thought it was fine. I have nothing wrong with this book at all. I'd probably put it like a high 3 maybe, but I'm going to choose not to rate it right now. It is the story of a girl. She is abused by her father and then ends up getting married to this older guy, kind of like given to him, like, you have to marry him. She didn't want to marry him. And then her life as his wife and raising his children, and then her love story with somebody else who comes into the picture. I won't talk about who that is, but she is talking to God in her letters, and then she finds out that her sister that she got separated from is still alive and living as a missionary in Africa, and her husband had hid those letters from her, and she finds out she's still alive and has been writing. So the end of the novel is her writing letters to her sister. So it was really interesting, and you start to hear her sister's perspective after a while, and she is African American living as a missionary in Africa. So it's kind of interesting to hear the perspective of a Black person growing up in the States as a missionary to Black people in Africa and what the African people felt about the missionaries and stuff. So that was kind of interesting. And the story was fine. It's a classic, right? The Poet X and Home is Not a Country were read kind of in tandem. I read Home is Not a Country and then The Poet X. They're both YA told in verse. Home is Not a Country is from a Sudanese American author and has magical realism in it. And her mom came from Sudan and has been grieving the loss of her father. Died when her mother was pregnant with her, so she never knew her father at all. And her mother is still very much in the midst of the grief of that. And she is also grieving in the sense of never knowing her dad, but she also feels like she has one name. What is her name? Mommy. Jessica, I'll be right there. I can't remember her name, but her mom had wanted to call her Yasmin, but that was the name her dad had wanted, so her mom chose a different name for her. She kind of pictures Yasmin as the daughter that she's not. The more put together one, the prettier one, the one that's a dancer like her mom, all this stuff, right? And it's kind of her coming to a realization of who she is, loving herself for who she is, despite not being this perfect Yasmin character that she is not. That was not her destiny to be her. It's a really beautiful story. I'm going to put it in the A category. It just didn't quite hit 5-star for me. I don't know why, but The Poet X I'm going to put up there by Elizabeth Acevedo as well. And this is an American story, Dominican. I think Elizabeth Acevedo usually writes Dominican American stories. And our main character is a poet and her family is very religious, strict Catholic upbringing, and she's questioning her faith and wants to break out and do her own thing, and the struggle between that and her mom. Anyways, I'm gonna stop this here with those last 3 books. Just hang in there. You won't notice. Through the magic of film and editing, you're not gonna notice the break, but I gotta go deal with the baby yelling for me. Hopefully I can finish this soon and tell you about the books. So guess who had to stop recording my tier ranking wrap up and didn't save the tier ranking list? Me, right here. I forgot. So instead of going back and redoing the whole thing all over again, I'm just gonna go ahead with these last 3 that I still had left to film. That's okay. You'll see in the video where I had tier ranked everything and what I talked about. So I got these 3 left here. Spy Family, which the first volume of Spy Family includes the 10 that I've read so far. And I already ranked the short story one. This is a manga and it is spy, adventure, comedy, action, and it is about our main spy, Twilight. He has to go undercover. He is trying to keep peace between the East and the West in Japan somewhere. His name is Lloyd Forger and he goes by the codename Twilight, and his mission, he has to infiltrate this elite school to get close to the target. So he needs to get a wife and a daughter and have this fake marriage, fake family. And the daughter that he picks is a telepath, and the wife he ends up with is an assassin, and nobody knows about each other except for their daughter Anna, who's the telepath. You can watch my Spy Family reading vlog to see my thoughts, feelings, what it's all about, and everything. I can judge if it's a good manga or not, but I can't judge it based on other mangas. But I'm going to put it up in top tier for me. I've liked it enough to buy all of them. I do now own the volume 11. That came in like right after I finished recording, but I need a little bit of a break anyways. But it was a lot of fun. And then Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. This is a book that is kind of like a cozy mystery. You are getting the perspective of 4 different people actually in the story. I was only expecting to get one perspective, so that was interesting. And Vera Wong, she is in her 60s and she owns this tea shop. I believe they're in San Francisco. And one day she wakes up and there's a dead man in her tea shop. So she has decided that the cops are useless. They think it was just an accident or whatever, and she's going to find out who murdered him. She's going to be the amateur sleuth. She watches a lot of CSI, and she figures that the murderer always comes back to the scene of the crime. So she puts a thing out in the paper, an obituary for the guy, and sees who comes back to see her tea shop because it's doing so bad. She only gets like 1 customer every day. It's the same guy. And these people show up, and she's like, "You're my suspects." And there's like a suspect list and reasons why it could be them. And we are going through the journey of her discovering their past, because like any cozy mystery, all these people have a reason for wanting this guy to be dead, and they're all connected somehow. It's a little bit found family. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. It was for the Literally Dead book club for March. I really liked it. This is the same author as Dial A for Aunties, which I never did read, but I really enjoyed this, and I'm gonna put it up in the S category. And you can watch my goals video that is hopefully coming out soon. I'm gonna post this one first and then my goals video, and I talk about it more there and why I enjoyed it. And then the last one that I read that was just finished at the beginning of April, but I've decided to add into here anyways, is Anne Rule, The Stranger Beside Me. I heard about this book through Katie from Katie Coulson. This is a nonfiction book about Ted Bundy, and Anne Rule was a cop at one point. She wasn't a cop during the time that Ted Bundy was around and doing his killings, but she had been a cop at one time. She was a writer, a journalist. Because she had been a cop and she was a journalist, she had ins with other cops and had pretty good relationships with them, and she was reporting on some of these murders that were happening. But being in the 70s, it's not like today where it's more easily accessible what is happening all around the world. She wasn't hearing so much about girls that were being murdered in other places where Ted happened to be after he moved away from where she was, but they both worked at a crisis center answering phones for people who were calling about suicide, and that's how she got to know Ted Bundy. They weren't the best of friends. They didn't grow up together or anything. Anne Rule was 16 years older than him, I believe, but she did know him and had questions when he was accused of it. And things first started happening where things were lining up, and it's like, maybe Ted Bundy is this Ted guy that they are looking for, and maybe he did commit these crimes. She did go back and forth quite a bit about, did he do it, didn't he do it, do I believe him saying that he did not do it? Because there was a lot of like circumstantial evidence, but not a lot of hard, indisputable evidence. And she really struggled with knowing the horrific things that this person was doing, that they said that this person was doing, and it possibly being somebody that she knows and cares about. And I thought it was really well written, and I guess she has written more true crime books that I want to check out, because I thought this one was really well done. But this one definitely had that personal touch because she actually knew him, and they wrote each other letters when he was in jail and had a few phone conversations. So it was really, really good. And if you're into true crime and don't know enough about Ted Bundy already, I would highly recommend it. So these last 3 are going up in the S tier. This video is very long so far. I thought this would be a good way to organize my first quarter wrap up, but I will have to think of a different way of doing it next time, I think, just because this takes so long. But this was fun. I enjoyed it. And I got a package in the mail today, some books I pre-ordered. So I thought I would end with just a little tiny mini book haul. When you shop at our big box store here in Canada, Indigo Chapters, they have deals for pre-orders. You get like 500 bonus points on most anticipated books coming out. And I don't do a ton of pre-orders, but I do check them occasionally for the extra points. So I think that's what all these are. Oh, I didn't know I bought this. So I got 3 books here. I haven't really been doing book hauls on my channel this year. I've bought, I think, 16 books, and then plus these 3, or these 3 are included in the 16. I don't remember. But let's see what I got. Okay, so I can't really show what this is because this is a book for Father's Day for my husband. So pretend you didn't see this. I bought Abby Jimenez. This is something I want to read coming up sometime between now and June. And this is just for the summer. I have not read a single Abby Jimenez yet. And I was hoping to read this year Yours Truly and what was the other one? Yours Truly and you know that one everyone always talks about, Part of Your World, are the 2 I wanted to read. I didn't realize I bought this one. I really love this cover though. Kind of not the best lighting, but when it comes to love, Emma is cursed. Every guy she dates finds his true love after they break up, but it turns out she's not the only one afflicted with this condition. His name is Justin, and his Reddit thread about being love's good luck charm has gone viral. Now the 2 have come up with an ingenious plan. If they date each other, their curses will cancel out and they'll go on to find their soulmate. Only Justin wasn't supposed to be so unbelievably cute and hilarious. Hopefully Abby Jimenez is as great as everyone says she is, because I pre-ordered her new book. And then this one sounded really interesting. This one's got the deckled edges, and it's called The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This one, I remember I read the synopsis and I got my husband to read the synopsis. The cover's fine. It's cute. The tagline thing is, do you take this man? No. What about this one? When Lauren returns home to her flat in London late one night, she's greeted at the door by her husband, Michael. There's only one problem. She's not married. She's never seen this man before in her life. But according to her friends, her much improved decor and the photos on her phone, they've been together for years. As Lauren tries to puzzle out how she could be married to someone she can't remember meeting, Michael goes to the attic to change a light bulb and abruptly disappears. In his place, a new man emerges, and a new, slightly altered life reforms around her. Realizing that her attic is creating an infinite supply of husbands, Lauren confronts the question: if swapping lives is as easy as changing a light bulb, how do you know you've taken the right path? When do you stop trying to do better and start actually living? This is a debut novel, and it sounds quirky and fun, and I'm excited. I read the synopsis to him and asked if he thought I should get it, because I think there was this one or another one I was thinking about getting. Now my husband's gonna be suspicious every time I tell him to go change a light bulb. That's my book haul. That is my first quarter wrap up. Overall, I think I've had a pretty good reading year so far. Comment down below how the first quarter has been for you in life, in reading, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you for being here. If you stuck around this long, that is absolutely insane, and I love you for it. I will talk to you next time. Bye.